Iranian woman back again to discuss the US going to war with Iran. You know, I actually predicted many years ago that I was going to have to make this exact video one day. And I'm going to tell you why, but first let's talk about where we are. Where we are is that Donald Trump recently sent a letter to the supreme leader of the regime in Iran. Now, we don't know exactly what the letter stated, but reports indicate that there was a request to totally dismantle the regime's nuclear program and to stop funding its proxies in the Middle East. Regardless of what the letter said, the supreme leader rejected it and shut down all talks with the US. Trump then said in no uncertain terms that the only consequence of this rejection would be war. Now we are exactly where we knew we would end up. For Iranian Americans, this is a war between our two homes. And that's not an easy thing to deal with. And the reason that we ended up here is because of decades of a failed policy of diplomacy and appeasement. In 2015, the US and Europe entered as co-signatories into the JCPOA. The JCPOA was an agreement that the regime would stop expanding its nuclear program. It would stop enriching in exchange for $150 billion in frozen assets. The problem with the agreement was that it was just a temporary measure. It was just kicking the can down the road to today because nobody knew what to do. It had sunset provisions, which meant that after 8 years, the regime could enrich X amount, after 10 years, X amount, and after 15 years, the agreement would expire completely and the regime could enrich to its heart's content $150 billion richer. And that enrichment worked out exactly as we said it would, with the IRGC's stranglehold over Iran increasing, lynching people, and maximizing its influence across the Middle East through funding its proxies. So then the question is, why did anyone ever think of doing diplomacy with this regime? Now you understand the true price of propaganda, of this pro-jihadist propaganda that has been circulating Ivy League institutions for the past several decades that say, you know what, maybe this regime are just misunderstood. Maybe 1979 was just an indigenous revolution against Western imperialism. Maybe this is all just atrocity propaganda to demonize people of color. They've been oppressing, torturing, murdering, and lynching people. That propaganda shaped the way that policymakers think. And they said, well, if these guys are just misunderstood, maybe we should just be doing diplomacy with them. Maybe we should be shaking their hands. Maybe we should be giving them money. Maybe they will mirror our diplomacy back to us. They were clear with you from the very beginning and until this day. They said, death to America, death to Israel, and death to the West. And what you heard was, maybe they just want to be friends. And then people say, well, what was the alternative? What else could have been done? I'll tell you exactly what else could have been done. You could have empowered the people of Iran to take out the regime for themselves, because during that time, there was a different revolution going on in Iran. It was called the Green Movement. And the people of Iran were close to toppling the regime themselves. And even Obama came out years later and said that he made a mistake, that he should have sided with the people of Iran against the regime. Because guess what? If you had supported the Iranian people back then, there would be no regime and no nuclear program to worry about. Don't tell me that there was no other choice. There has always been another choice. Not only did we give you a choice, we gave you a roadmap. We gave you step-by-step instructions. Number one, isolate the regime economically, socially. Stop doing business with them. Stop trading with them. Stop negotiating with them. Number two, support the Iranian people. Maximum support for the people rising up. 3, support the key opposition figure in the diaspora, the Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. Instead, the exact opposite was done. The regime was empowered, funded, emboldened. The Iranian people were abandoned and ignored. And not only was the Crown Prince ignored and disinvited everywhere, but the UN was legitimizing this regime, inviting them to chair the Commission on Human Rights and the Forum on Disarmament. And then you say, how did we get here? You brought us here. And this is exactly why I said, I predicted I would have to make this exact video one day, because the empowerment from diplomacy was only ever going to lead to the catastrophe of war. And that's the price. of ignoring the Iranian people. That's the price of the pro-jihadist propaganda that's still circulating these streets in protest today. And that price isn't being paid by the Ivy League elites. That price is being paid by the abandoned Iranian people who were robbed of not just the opportunity, but the right to free themselves and by extension free the rest of the world. Between these two extremes of diplomacy and war, our only hope, the Iranian people, was lost.